Today's podcast is brought to you by Eddie. Find better candidates, conduct more focused interviews, and make data-driven hiring decisions. Hire Eddie, hire faster, hire smarter, hire more. Learn more at eddie.com. Now, let's podcast. Welcome to Disrupt Salt Lake City. My name is Jared Olson, and I am joined today by Kyle Muir, the CEO of Fuse Play, and Elisa Garn of Christofferson Business Travel and Disrupt Salt Lake City and a million other things as well. How are you guys doing?
So good.
Doing awesome.
Kyle, thank you so much for joining us today. The reason we wanted to bring you on is I've been following Fuse Play online, and you guys recently did a post about human capital and how to start investing at that at a really young age. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of stuff going on within the STEM world that we see starting in like pre-K and K through 6 and junior high and high schools. And we really just kind of want to know a little bit more about the research you've been doing in that area. And so as just kind of an initial introduction, why don't you tell us a little bit about Fuse Play? Tell us about what you do. I mean, you're a busy man. You're an entrepreneur. You're a pilot. You're a adventurer. And so tell us a little bit about you, and let's kind of hop into talking about human capital after.
Yeah, perfect. So Fuse Play is an idea. It's I have a lot of ideas. I am an entrepreneur, and my sister actually was the visionary behind this idea. She has 3 daughters, and we were talking, and she was expressing concerns and hardships that she was having trying to find products for her daughters that would teach them science, technology, engineering, math, right? STEM. And so I'm sitting there listening to that and thinking to myself of, all these different products that I've seen on Kickstarter, all geared towards older individuals, and, kind of came to the conclusion that this actually might be, my sister might be onto something. Cool. So that's where the idea came from. And long story short, over the past 3 years, we ended up developing a product that teaches kids. It's an open source IoT device. So when I say programming, coding, I'm referring specifically to electronics and code and firmware that you would use to program some sort of connected device. And so the product that we came up with is a Frisbee. You push buttons, you can wave a magnet wand around it and play. There's 12 different games, and they're like Simon Says, Hot Potato, retro games, old school games, and they're fun. They're easy to get into, and then the magic is when you connect it to a computer, you can modify the code for each of those games, and just by playing and through association, like you'd learn a language, you can learn how to code playing Frisbee.
Okay, so my experience with this is my son is he's 6, so he's in first grade, and he's been doing some code.org for a few years.
All right.
And he likes to go in and play these games that you get to move a character to go get the star or something like that, and he's had a lot of fun with it. So how does this compare to something like a code.org thing? Does it have to be on the computer, or can you actually program with your Frisbee?
That's a good question. It can be both. So code.org is awesome. And I have found, because I go young, so I'm, I'll take kids as young as 6 into text-based Arduino script. So if a child has touched code.org, I love it because they're typically, they've seen enough to just jump in and do their kid thing, and they don't just jump right into it without any problems. But so code.org is a great little, I think, introduction to text-based script. There's others out there, Scratch. We have a connection with Snap. So Snap is basically just like Scratch. Yeah, for those, I guess.
Yeah, what's Scratch and Snap?
Yeah, so Scratch and they're drag and drop code blocks. Okay. So instead of typing text, you're basically dragging a blocked command and then linking them together like Legos to execute some, there's maybe a little character that you make jump up and down, something like that.
That's cool. So what kind of age group do you see people using these products with? Like, how old are we talking?
So I go young, but I feel like traditionally, like if we were just to look at the market on a broad scale, it's typically like 6th grade, it's starting to tear down. But I think like even Scratch, I see commonly used at the 7th and 8th grade level. But in my opinion, I think that hopefully sooner than later we should see Scratch and other, I think, more simplistic coding platforms tear down to younger and younger ages.
Cool. So when we were talking a little bit earlier, you were talking about some research that you guys have done from starting from a newborn when they begin nursing. Like that's how early this research is that you're doing.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about what you are finding out and give us some context there, and then we can kind of link that into the human capital side?
Yeah. So the studies show, the neuroscience studies show that kids between the age of 3 and 10 whittle away or pair trim half of their neuroconnectors. So, 3 to 5, there's significant brain development, and then 6 through 10. By the time you're hitting 10, through your experience, through your culture, through your learning environments, you're whittling away half of your neuroconnectors, and at age roughly 10, that is sort of like what you're left with to evolve for the rest of your life, right? And we live in an interesting time now because of technology and the way that it allows us to educate and teach ourselves at a very, very early age. So with that statistic is kind of, I guess, a marquee statistic. I believe that children, specifically children ages 3 to 5. I focus on kids age 6 to 10, but that age range, in my opinion, they're the most undervalued humans on Earth.
3 to 5 or 6 to 10?
Well, 3 to 10 is the period where they whittle down half of those neuroconnectors. But from a neuroscience perspective, age 3 to 5 and age 6 through 10 are significantly different developmental process or developmental periods, I guess you could say.
Okay, so there's been a lot of conversation going on about STEM and having that in school, right? And we start seeing things like code.org come into play, and there's been some serious roadblocks and hurdles with that because our teachers in K through 6 aren't equipped to really teach that because they just don't have that background and understanding, and so there's a lot of focus on that, which I think is great. But we're not seeing a lot of conversation, or I'm curious, maybe we are, about developing the relationships of interacting with people. Mm-hmm. So through emotional intelligence and understanding how to communicate in a technology-driven age. What is the research in the neuroscience, if you have that background, tell us about how people can connect with other individuals?
Yeah, so, I'm not a neuroscientist, so I can't really get much deeper than
just play one on TV.
what I already have. But no, so right now, I like when I hear you kind of ask those questions or like that line of thought, like the academic or educational term is digital citizenship. And it's the idea that these kids, the kids of tomorrow, they're not like us. They're not just on social media, but they're literally interacting, controlling, communicating, influencing through connected devices, right? The Internet of Things, the IoT space. So I think that and professional development, I think, is probably the single most important thing. I'm a startup. I'm constantly pivoting, and I've actually been recently considering just going 100% towards professional development, so that we can help the teachers who are speaking and most directly influencing this young group of up-and-coming humans, and properly helping them learn and take advantage of, I guess, their neuroplasticity, if we're going to continue on that theme. But yeah, I think the kids of tomorrow are going to be interacting and working in completely different. We're seeing a little bit of it nowadays with like co-working spaces and hot desking and different things like that. And how do you accommodate that in a workforce? And if I'm paying somebody 6-figure salary and I'm letting them jump around in hotspot or come in flex work, that kind of thing, what does that look like? And I think that and the millennials are the ones who have, caused the workforce to readjust that way. And I think with technology, and, this is what I influence kids with, but when you have skills to control and program electronics, when you're conscious of what the blockchain means in terms of the democratization of information, your world is so much more expansive than the place that you go to work or the individual that's in front of you that you're working with. And I don't know what that future looks like, but I definitely am conscious of the changes to come, and hope that, I guess, the little, the influence that I have with my product, I guess, caters to a wholesome version of it.
So, Elisa, our kids are Gen Z, or the I generation is kind of the coin they've been given.
Cute.
It is cute, isn't it? What do you think we need in our future workforce? I mean, as we talk about, co-op spaces, interacting with people in this highly digital age, what do you think our kids today that are in pre-K and K through 6 are in need of to be better in the future workforce?
Well, I mean, just by nature, technology is the essence of their generation. It's such an entrenched part of their, not just their psyche, but who they are. I'm actually really interested to know, in the next 10 to 20 years, as they start entering the workforce, my little guy will be 7. So I think about his first job. Is it going to be the fast food restaurant that I came from, or is it going to be consulting coding and building out apps, or whatever?
Imagine a 17-year-old being a consultant. That's awesome.
Oh boy. All right. Yeah. But I mean, when you think about even how retail is going and how we shop and how we consume goods, like, I can't even tell you how grateful I am that now Smith's delivers my groceries to my house. The less interaction I have to have with people. It's like adding and compounding to this. It's not that I don't enjoy the interface and connectivity of working with other people face to face, but even in HR, like, I find myself resonating toward a preference toward, again, simplicity and ease and the comforts of home. And so when you think about how that is going to impact our next generation and them entering the workforce, it wouldn't surprise me at all if we see less demand on real estate, or you see less investment in brick and mortar locations, because if work can truly be done anywhere by anyone that has the talent to fill that need, then you kind of get into a little bit of Gattaca stuff there. But it's really fascinating to me that my son is going to have a very different work experience than I've had.
So technology will change the HR profession. It might not be done in person because there might not be brick and mortars, and there might not be a need for that. And so the administrative HR people that don't want to change just probably won't have a position, or they'll have to adapt because of technology. Is that kind of what you're saying?
I mean, fair, but I think that's probably several generations away. When you're talking about a significant change like this, although technology is just compounding and amplifying at an amazing rate, even now, like today, there's still companies out there, there's still HR professionals out there that are doing HR work that was done in 1940. That's amazing to me. It still exists, and as long as there's a demand for it, there will be people to fill it. But is that really where the value of our profession is? I don't think so. I think it's going to be more of the separation of, I call it people operations and talent, but people operations, more of the historic HR compliance, policy, procedure. You have to have those things to scale a business, even if it's remote and in the cloud. But the other side is identifying talent. How are you incentivizing talent? How are you paying that talent? I think it's going to be interesting to see if Bitcoin ends up becoming a currency that we have to be challenged with in payroll, and how that works. So it's a little off topic here, but I absolutely think that technology, not only is it already changing our work, but even the people that are coming in, their expectations of work. We thought we were in for it with millennials. Yeah, just wait. You wait. And then we get to experience what the other generations, their frustrations with us.
Well, yeah, and we should have a baby boomer in here to tell us like what we're like as kids, but I mean, I'm coaching my son's soccer team, and I tell you what, these 6-year-olds are super strategic. Like, they now know how to play positions and pass the ball, and like they're thinking, well, if I stand right here when the ball comes, I can get it, and like they're doing this on their own as 6-year-olds. So we're starting to see that, which is really cool. Mm-hmm. So Kyle, a question for you. As we increase technology and we see more of that, how do we get these young minds to be prepared to interact with humans? Do we just say, okay, it's going to come through technology and through social platforms, or do we need this element of human interaction and being face-to-face?
I think that the human interaction part is critical. Human-computer interaction is one of the, I guess, themes that I try to influence and teach with this product, because at the end of the day, there is a human at the other end. There is an emotional, living, breathing person that's being impacted for better or for worse. And so I think I guess your question is what can we do, or what can we do? And I loved the way you spoke and are thinking about your son, and will he be a consultant at age 17, right? And we kind of chuckle at that, but I really think from a human capital perspective, if we have moms and dads and educators that are looking at children that are up and coming with that kind of potential, I really don't think that it is that far out of the question relative to what they are capable of and what technology is able to support. And I think it's, and there's a huge human factor in this, because it requires us, really the less intelligent humans, because we didn't have technology, we didn't know these things when we were children. It requires a heavy dose of human factor to help that shift take place, and then ensure that the effect of that is for good. This morning I was talking with an individual that had an interesting story. So he was one of these tinkers, and just kind of on his own would mess around with database kind of stuff. This is back in like 2000, like Y2K days, for those that remember that era. And he was working at a call center, right? So he's like one of these college kids that's like, oh yeah, call center job, and not uncommon for a college kid. And he started to make these little widgets that would increase call performance just by 5 minutes for his own line of work. And then management kind of found out, like, oh, what are you doing? Like, you're doing that like in a minute and a half, versus like 5 minutes. Like, we want to roll this out across the entire team, and 5 times however many call centers. And he is now the owner of a data analytics company here in town that it does business dashboards and that type of thing. But I think it's a really cool story, because he's college age, right? And I think that this next wave, this next generation of human capital, they're your son's age right now. And so when will they have a moment to make an impact that is similar to what this guy made, while in college, working his first job at a call center? Probably sometime in high school. And I joke with people when I sell this product, 'cause I'm like, hey, it's only $129. Like, put your kid on this, spend $129, and all of that college tuition you're saving, you're going to get that as retirement, because they'll be fine by the time they're in high school.
Yeah, that's good.
It's true. We got our son, last Christmas, we bought the Osmo kit. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's an iPad attachment thing that you can plug in, and it's got a little mirror that attaches to it, and it's got coding and it's got music. But it's I particularly picked it as a mother because I'm like, he's on his iPad hours and hours and hours a day watching stupid YouTube videos. I gotta find something that at least is educational. And so we picked this one because it had some good reviews. And like, I'll come home and he just voluntarily has set it up, and he's coding and he doesn't even know he's coding. Or he's drawing artwork and the mirror is reflecting it up on the screen, but he's like physically doing it. And so he's learning these skills. But I'm a big fan of this type of learning anyway, where it's gamified, and gamification even in right now, like the workforce now. Millennials love to learn that way. Gen Z is already coming in and demanding that. So when we're looking at onboarding programs, or we're looking at building out a pipeline of, in travel specifically, like, it's no secret, we have a very aged population. We have people that are leaving our workforce and nobody is coming in because our systems are archaic. People don't want to learn how to use MS-DOS prompt scripting. It's crazy to me that the people that build these systems, and there's 6 competitors that all have the same exact technology but just do a different sequence of letters and numbers, and it's all MS-DOS. And it's mind-boggling to me that they're still investing in that particular technology without any interest in the people coming in and how they want to learn or how they want to work. So for my industry, I think it's going to be fascinating. But this gamification of whether it's coding or learning a new skill, or even the people interactions that we were talking about, it's really easy to turn that into something of a learning adventure without even knowing that you're learning.
Yeah, totally. So the gamification is happening, right? We're seeing that take place in education right now. It's maybe a little bit slower than we wanted, but it is taking place. What is happening in relation to teaching kids emotional intelligence and working with peers and teamwork and things like that? In your opinion, Kyle, like, what's happening in the education system that relates to that?
Yeah, so the emotional side, I hear that a lot more. Like, so when I circle at I go to all the major ed tech conferences, and that is definitely a theme that's being talked about. And I had an interesting experience here in Salt Lake over the summertime. I was doing a little workshop with the Zuby Flyer with a group of what kind of students were they?
Smart students.
No, they were like like not exchange students, but they were orphans.
Oh, okay.
They were older. They were Foster. Foster. I could not think of the word. I apologize.
Yeah, no, you're good.
But yeah, it was a group of 15 and 16-year-old foster kids, and so I got, and we were well into the workshop, and then I had one of the girls on the front row correct me kind of just out of the blue and say, "Hey, you've been calling he a her the entire time," and and I had that was my very first time not being conscious of gender issues that are very emotionally tied, but I'm actually having to respond to it. And in a moment like that, you have milliseconds.
Sure.
You have milliseconds and especially when it's a younger individual versus an adult, and that was interesting. And I don't think I guess I consider myself more forward thinking, probably a little more liberal, and that stopped me, that affected me. And most people, I've only had that happen one time. Most individuals I don't think have had to, you guys probably see it a lot in HR, or deal with it a lot in HR, but I think it's a very real thing as we deal with social cultural issues. And I don't know, I guess, necessarily if technology is tied to that.
Sure. Outside
of the fact that technology is this universal thing that, if you're a child growing up, everybody is going to know how to code and, swap code snippets because you're doing something cool and I want to link it into my thing. But there's certainly an emotional element of the human-computer interaction that's going to influence those intelligent snippets that live forever.
How do we increase those amounts of human interaction to make it so that people want more human interaction instead of wanting to push it away? Because with technology being so easily accessible, it's easy for us to say, like, I just want to text them instead of actually call them.
Are you just saying that because I said I don't have to go grocery shopping now?
No, hey, I agree with that. We don't have it delivered. We pick up. We go to Walmart, do the pickup, and it's awesome. But how do we encourage more human interaction?
So I think that there's potentially, and you guys can, as HR gurus and experts, can speak up on this, but I think that there is, from a workforce perspective, I think that there is a balance with work-life flexibility. But in general, like, to answer the question, I look at the way that kids operate. And I don't think that kids operate too much different than we would operate if we didn't have the I guess, like, the deadlines and the timelines that life puts on you. And that's what technology eliminates. Technology eliminates all those things and gives us more time. Right now, the problem is that often we hear about that time being used quote unquote inappropriately, right? Excessive screen time, or, just wasted, due to whatever.
YouTube videos.
Yeah, YouTube. Sure, I'm guilty of that.
So are there any studies, out there that talk about what is an appropriate amount of screen time for kids?
There are. I don't know them off the top of my head necessarily, like by the number. We certainly thought about that, and if my sister were here, she knows some of those stats more than I do. But we certainly considered that. Even our company name Fuse came from this idea that there is physical time and there is screen time. And what I've observed, and this is what I don't think I know it's talked about a lot, but I don't know if it will. I guess if I had to forecast or project, I don't know if it'll be a huge problem in the future. The reason being is because at least with my product that has a physical component, I guess most that's one of the reasons why we're different. Most code.org that you mentioned in these different devices, you're on the screen the whole time, like you're building a web page or something like that. I think that as kids get more versed in controlling physical devices and have more freedom just in life in general, I hope that individuals will take advantage of that. But who knows? Maybe based on history, maybe not. I don't know.
Well, there was a while back, my son loves building forts. I mean, whatever.
Who doesn't?
Exactly, right? 6-year-old boy.
I want to hang out.
Yeah, me too.
He's so fun.
Yeah.
But there was a game that somebody told me about where you code, like you basically, in essence, tell this computer ahead of time what square footage you're working with and like how many pillows you have and blankets.
Cool.
And then
That's awesome.
in code, like you code out this map, in essence, of this fort building, and then you physically go, like the idea is you print it off or you take it off of the screen and then you go build it. So there's the physical element as well.
I love that.
I really like that
That's
idea
cool.
because it still ties in, like Jared, what you're getting at. Like not every job in the future is going to be technology based.
Mm-hmm.
The technology skills are going to be there because they're growing up with it.
Mm-hmm.
But there's still probably going to be a growth in demand just because of the nature of how technology is evolving and the constant nature of change with it anyway. But that people element but how are you developing personal skills? Because these kids that end up coming out that we experience now, we try to hire in tech and it's like, but the guy can't freaking write an email to save his life and nobody wants to work with him because he's just like a weirdo.
Mm-hmm.
But if you can tie in those skills to where there's still that physical element or there's still a connection to you have to build the skills of how to work with another person or project management outside of numbers and letters, I think that's really fascinating. And I love that element is built into to your tool. And I would love to see more of that, but I don't know if there's quite that blend of I don't know, the options that are out there that I've seen, it's usually one or the other. There's not a lot that tie it together.
Yeah, I love that so much, and I think the key to all of that is the experience. Like, what is that core experience? And in the case of the tent thing, it's like we're going to build a fort, and then there's this, technology, but the human interaction revolves around that experience. And you see often, like all the technology companies, here and out of state, what do? They create these experiences, and that's what they, those experiences are aimed to get people, developers that, traditionally, I think this will change too, but traditionally maybe aren't the most interactive of folks. It gets them interacting up and out and about. But I think as I'm all about the decentralized, open source type of interactions. But I think that more and more we'll see human experience drive our interactions and working relationships.
I like that a lot, because culture is a social experience. That's what workplace culture is. We go to work, we have an experience, and it's defined by what the culture is and how we operate as an organization. And so that's why social media, I think, has a really important place in business and the things we're doing, because it takes it online, but you can take it offline and you still have that social interaction and experience with people. And so we are creating experiences within the workplace, and being able to find that blend is really important. A question I'd like to throw out to both of you is, how do we get more people, young, junior high, maybe high school age people, or even starting younger, interested in working in people operations and focusing on working with people? We're seeing a lot more technology infused into HR, and we've talked a lot about that on these podcasts, but how do we get more junior high and high school people interested in working within people operations?
To me, it's a matter of I think the people that tend to pursue a path here that do really well in more of the progressive side of HR that we've talked about, in my opinion, it's curiosity. It's kids that ask a lot of questions, that like to know how things work and how they operate. Because when you think about it, even the title, people operations, right? It's a machine. Ultimately, it boils down to human mechanics. How do you process information? What's your psychology? Why do you do the things that you do? How can I tap into those motivators to meet your needs, exceed your needs, to get the best product that I can out of you, which is work? So for me, I think that people that just have that I want to know why kind of brain, that is a little less mechanical in terms of physical, tangible items, and more on I just want to know why people do the way that they do, human psychology, and understanding and tapping into just that the people side of things. And to me is a good path to identify those people. I don't know if that's totally different than how it's been, but HR hasn't really been an intentional career path historically. So I don't know.
Yeah, and I guess my thoughts are more educational, but I think that going back to kind of experience and project-based learning, right now the traditional school system is one that has evolved out of from the founding fathers as an effort to save manufacturing and grow manufacturing. And so there are these sort of desk-oriented, head down type of workflows, when to the point that you made, Jared, we are emotional beings. We learn emotionally, we live emotionally, and that's how we, any intelligence that we garner is going to be magnified by the emotional connection to it. And so I think that there's a documentary called Made to Succeed that came out, I think, a year or two, and the school that's featured in it is in San Diego. It's called My Tech High, and it's somewhat controversial because they don't focus at all on test scores. It's a very eclectic workflow, but it's very project oriented, and so for the entire course of the year, the kids are constantly interacting between their groups, other groups, and other classrooms to accomplish certain very abstract goals that they define themselves. And I think kids coming out of a program like that would be primed for a human-centered workspace or a human-oriented job than kind of just the experience I had. I've had to learn a lot of those skills by actually going to work, right? And there should be skills that you learn before going to work.
Yeah. Oh, I love that.
Cool. Well, Kyle, thank you so very much for joining us and talking about this. If people are interested in knowing more about Fuse and your flyer, how do they get that? For those that are listening that have kids and want to get involved, how do they get in touch with you?
So my email is just Kyle, Kyle, at fuseplay.io, and you can also just go to our website, fuseplay with a Z, F-U-Z-E, play.io.
Okay, great. Awesome. Elisa, thank you. Kyle, thank you so very much for your time today.
Thanks,
Thank
Jared.
you.